At my son's wedding, his bride screamed, "You don't belong here." I was stunned by her harsh words, but in that moment of humiliation, my bold decision to stand up, reveal the shocking truth behind their marriage, and expose the secrets they'd been hiding changed everything. The hall fell silent in an instant. My daughter-in-law stood on the stage, her white gown glowing under the chandeliers, her finger pointed at me like an accusation. Her voice carried across the room, slicing through the laughter and music. "You don't belong here." The words didn't echo, they landed heavy, final, undeniable. Chairs creaked as guests shifted uncomfortably. A fork clattered against a plate. Every head turned toward me, eyes wide, mouths half open, waiting to see what I would do. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at her. My heart wasn't racing. It was heavy, like a stone lodged in my chest. I glanced at my son, standing beside her. I prayed silently that he would defend me, tell her she was out of line, remind her who I was. But he didn't. He lowered his gaze, his jaw clenched, and his silence told me more than any words could. He chose her. That was the moment I realized I was truly alone. I rose from my chair, adjusting the shawl draped over my shoulders. My hands trembled, but I hid them in the folds of fabric. I could feel the eyes of relatives and neighbors on me, some pitying, some secretly entertained by the scandal unfolding before them. I heard whispers ripple through the room like wind through dry leaves. "She told her to leave," one voice hissed. At her own son's wedding, another murmured. I lifted my chin and began to walk. Each step toward the exit sounded louder than the last, my heels tapping against the polished floor, echoing through the silence. The bride's eyes followed me, her lips curled into a small, satisfied smile, as if she had won some battle I never agreed to fight. At the doorway, I caught my reflection in a tall mirror. My face was pale, but my posture was straight, unbroken. My late husband's voice returned to me in that moment, the way he used to say, "Never let anyone see you small. Even when they try to cut you down, stand tall." I held on to those words as tightly as I held my shawl. Outside, the cold night air wrapped around me. The muffled music started up again inside, laughter returning as if nothing had happened. I sat on a stone bench near the entrance, trying to steady my breath. The scent of roses from the nearby garden was sharp in the cold, mixing strangely with the bitterness rising in my throat. A young waiter stepped outside carrying a tray of empty glasses. When he saw me sitting alone, he paused. For a moment, he looked unsure, but then he walked over and handed me a glass of water. "Don't worry," he said softly, almost like a secret. "People always remember the ones who stay calm." His words startled me, not because they were profound, but because they came from someone who had no reason to comfort me. I managed a small nod, my throat too tight to respond. That small kindness, from a stranger, felt more genuine than the silence of my own son. When the ceremony finally ended, I left before anyone could approach me. I didn't want pity, and I didn't want forced words of sympathy from people who had just watched me be humiliated like it was theater. The drive home was quiet. Street lights flashed across the car windows in sharp intervals, carving the night into pieces. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the bride's voice, my son's silence, the whispers, the way no one stood up for me. Each time, the weight inside me grew heavier. At home, I unlocked the door and stepped into the stillness of my living room. I didn't turn on the lights right away. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock. My handbag slid off the chair onto the floor, forgotten. On the wall hung a framed photo of my late husband. His smile seemed frozen in another world, one where I still felt respected and loved. I stood in front of it and whispered, "You left me with everything, didn't you? You trusted me to protect it." My voice broke slightly, but I kept speaking. "And now, I see why." I walked over to the cabinet and pulled out the drawer where I had kept our most important documents. My fingers brushed over the file that carried his will. I hadn't looked at it in months. But tonight, I pulled it out and spread it open on the table. Every line was there, every signature, every page that confirmed what I had known but ignored. I was in control. Not my son, not his wife. Me. The assets, the property, the future they thought was theirs, it all came through me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the papers, the corners curling slightly from age. The humiliation from earlier still burned, but now it mixed with something else, a quiet, steady fire building inside me. My silence at the wedding had not been weakness. It had been restraint. And restraint, I realized, was often the sharpest blade. I thought of her words again, "You don't belong here." She wanted me gone. She wanted me erased from their lives. But I would not vanish. No, I would stay exactly where I was, and I would remind her of one thing she didn't yet understand: the foundation she stood on was mine. I folded the will carefully and placed it back in the drawer. My hands no longer trembled. I closed the drawer softly, as though sealing away not just papers, but a plan that had begun to take shape inside me. The house was silent, but inside me, a storm had awakened. The wedding had broken me, yes. But in that brokenness, I had found something stronger than pride, stronger than anger. I had found the clarity to see them for who they truly were, and the strength to make them see me for who I had always been. That night, I went to bed without tears. I lay awake in the dark, my heart no longer heavy with shame, but steady with certainty. Her words would not vanish. They would follow her, echo back to her, and in time, they would return as consequences she could never escape. At first light I lay still, certain and awake. I reached for my phone and called Mr. Walters. He answered on the second ring. 10 o'clock, he said, as if we had set this long ago. I dressed simply and drove through a pale morning. His office was orderly. He set the will between us. We skipped pleasantries. "I'm ready to use what he left me," I said. He folded his hands. "Then we'll set terms that hold." We moved line by line, real estate into a trust with conditions, cash divided between a community endowment and education grants, my son's access postponed until he demonstrated steady work, clean accounts, and respect in writing. Nothing dramatic, just structure. From there I drove to the bank. Mrs. Patel greeted me with the kindness of someone who remembers birthdays. In a side office she opened the dashboards linked to my email. "You're still a primary," she said, turning the screen. A string of transfers left an old household account my husband created for contingencies. Each payment was modest, but the pattern ran clean, scheduled, routed to a relative of my daughter-in-law. "Please print full statements," I said. She did, stapling each month. We restored alerts to my number. I left with copies, the paper warm against my palm. At home I cleared the dining table and worked with a pencil. I traced dates, circled names, and noted the rhythm of each withdrawal. I built a binder: transfers, purchases, requests. Into it went a florist invoice marked "Mother will cover extras," a boutique receipt dated 2 days before the wedding, and a message forwarded to me by mistake promising a repayment once everything is under my control. I did not fume. I catalogued. 2 days later I attended the library board meeting. Our roof fund had stalled. When the floor opened, I stood. "A gift has arrived," I said, "in honor of my daughter-in-law, who values bright rooms for children." The treasurer smiled as I handed her a check from the new endowment. Applause moved around the table like a soft wave. Pens scratched, and the room felt lighter by a shade. That afternoon she called. "Why my name?" Her voice was tight. "Because the library matters," I said, "and families should be known for more than parties." She breathed once, sharply. "Don't use me." "Then wear it well," I replied, and ended the call. I kept going. The food pantry needed a refrigerated case. I funded it in honor of her. The senior center's van needed repairs. I covered those the same way. Photos went up online, ribbon cuttings, little plaques with her name. She couldn't own it without admitting she hadn't arranged it. She couldn't refuse without seeming ungrateful. The knot tightened without my hands. On Sunday I brought a pie to their apartment. My son looked worn, sleeves rolled, kind eyes dimmed by short nights. We ate quietly. When the delivery driver arrived with an extra dish she'd added, her card declined. She laughed, tried another, then passed my son his wallet. He paid, murmuring something about banks being slow. No one commented. While she rinsed plates, my son stood by the doorway, voice low. "Mom, did I make you feel alone?" The question was careful. "You left me standing by myself," I said, not unkindly. "But you can walk back." He nodded once, then turned as she returned, cheerful and brittle. I visited Mr. Walters twice more to finalize language and set dates when donations would flow automatically. He prepared release letters. I drafted notes that kept praise on the cause, not the giver. There'll be talk, he said. Talk washes through, I answered. Ledgers remain. Small gestures kept me grounded. Mrs. Lopez from church squeezed my hands after service and whispered, "Grace looks good on you." A neighbor left a card in my mailbox. "Thank you for keeping the library lights on." I slid the card into the binder's back pocket with the statements. Paper can be cold, the right paper warms. I kept proof. For their anniversary, I reserved a corner table at a restaurant with tall windows. I arrived early, asked the hostess to add a fourth chair, and ordered sparkling water. They came on time, dressed well. I complimented her necklace. She lifted it with a satisfied glance. At 7, Mr. Walters walked in carrying a slim briefcase. My daughter-in-law's expression cooled. "I didn't expect business," she said lightly. "Family," I corrected. Mr. Walters set a folder between the bread plates and spoke in an even tone. "By authority of the will, the following changes are now effective." He slid copies to each of us. My son read silently, jaw tight. She read aloud until the words stopped her. "Deferred distributions, conditional release, annual review." She looked up. "You delayed his inheritance." "I aligned it with responsibility," I said. "Nothing here is punitive." "It feels like a verdict," she snapped. "It feels like stewardship," I answered. She pushed back her chair, the scrape turned heads. "You're embarrassing us." I met her eyes. "I am protecting what was built." My son squared the pages into a neat stack, aligning corners until his fingers steadied. He looked at me not as the boy I'd bandaged but as a man seeing the beams beneath a roof. "Is there a path?" he asked quietly. "There's always a path," I said. "It begins with care." She stood, gathered her purse, and spoke to him without looking at me. "Are you coming?" He didn't rise. The window glass turned the evening gold. Beyond it, the street moved like a slow river. I signed my acknowledgement, placed it in the folder, and thanked the hostess when she refilled our glasses. The table held 4 settings, though only 3 of us occupied the moment. I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. The papers, the plans, and the calm were doing the speaking I chose not to do.